It is the Dean Legge Show for Georgia, the week of Georgia's game with Kentucky. Georgia coming off a really bad loss to Florida this past week, where nothing seemed to go right after that midway point of the second quarter, specifically after the Gators faked very successfully faked a fake field goal. I have to say, when I was sitting on the field, it really seemed to me like that was what they were going to do in that moment. But you know what, man? It always feels like that whenever anybody lines up for a kick. But I just thought that Florida had nothing to lose, and they played that way. They certainly played that way. And there's a couple things as a result of that win. Number one, I think I think two things. Number one, Will Muschamp may save his job down there. I mean, the only obvious loss they have left is Florida State, and that would mean he's 8-4 by my math. So I think he could be down there again next year. That seemed unthinkable a few weeks ago. Well, I don't know. I mean, I have, of course, no real insight there. And then number two, I think it would surprise me if we don't see more in the way of some different play at quarterback. Hudson Mason's got to deliver the ball better and quicker. Um, it's not all his fault. I think he's played pretty well at times this season, but Georgia's just gotten nothing out of that passing game this season for the most part. I mean, this past game was the first time in the season that Georgia threw for over 200 yards, and I know that that's not what Georgia is, but still, you gotta have some threat, and that would make it easier on the offense. So I don't know what the future holds. I expect Hudson to start, but I don't think it's necessarily a guarantee from here on out. He's got to play. He's got to be more efficient in the pass game. Georgia, Kentucky this week. Georgia is still very much in the SEC race. The issue for Georgia, though, is that they don't control their own destiny anymore, which is what happens when you get upset. Um, this is Georgia's last road game. This is the fifth week. Georgia has not played in Athens in a row. One of those was an off week, of course. But I know personally that's very draining. It's too much travel for me. For the team, I think it's a little bit easier because they're flying in and out, but it's still travel nonetheless. And twice across the country, twice across the South sort of starts to add up. And now going to Lexington, which is a 7-hour drive from Athens, that's a long drive after a tough loss to Florida. The Cats are not that bad. They ran out to a 5-1 start to the season, and they've lost, I think, three in a row. So they're 5-4, and they've got to beat either Georgia, Louisville, or Tennessee to get to a bowl game. And the last home game for the Cats is this week against Georgia. Just looking at the statistics, Georgia is number 3 in rushing, 10 in passing, which is what I talked about earlier, 7 in total offense. They still lead the conference in scoring. Kentucky, on the other hand, is 10th in the run. They really gouged South Carolina earlier this season, but they're 6th in the pass. Their quarterback is really not that bad. I would argue he's probably the best quarterback in the East. Now that's not a real great bunch, but Matty Mock has not played great this fall. And I do think that's one reason why Missouri could get tripped up here these last 3 games. Missouri's schedule is relatively complicated. Looking forward, they have to play at Texas A&M, at Tennessee, and Arkansas, and they could lose all 3 of those games. But Georgia needs them to lose once. Georgia has to beat Auburn and Kentucky. There's no way around it. But anyhow, the Cats are 11th in scoring. The problem for Kentucky, and this is what does not match up well for them at all, they are 13th against the run in defense. So that's going to be an issue for the Cats. Even though it looks like Sony Michel will probably be back, they will have to at least contend with Nick Chubb. If Sony gets back, that helps Nick. I mean, there have been people asking about why didn't Georgia run the ball with Nick Chubb, and Mike Bobo said Tuesday night that Nick was on pace to carry the ball 60 times in the game, which that's obviously impossible to do. It's too much. He would have gotten severely injured at some stage because of fatigue. So Kentucky will have to deal with, what is the number 3 rush offense against their number 13 rush defense, to me, that's going to cause some serious issues for Kentucky. Now, the question is this: is Georgia going to be prepared to play this game the way they need to be? They they prepared and did fine against Florida. They just, after a while in the game, didn't play defense very well. Didn't play offense so hot either. But in the third quarter, and I saw Georgia coming out of the halftime. I think they were down 14-7. They were a fired up bunch. They didn't seem. I mean, they seemed very ready to go. Um, but they didn't do the job. That's all there is to it. And Florida cruised to a 38-20 win. Kentucky's actually not that bad in some of the other statistical categories. They're sixth in kick return, 8 in punt return. Georgia's in the same ballpark. Kentucky has the second most interceptions in the conference. They have five. They're fifth in sacks, ninth in tackles for losses, and they are third in turnover margin. Georgia's still number one in turnover margin. So Georgia's defense needs to play better. Jeremy Pruitt was embarrassed, and rightfully so, after the performance against Florida this past week. Georgia has played better than that, and they did not play well on defense. Were they getting hold? Yes, but everyone gets held on the outside. You have to break that and make them call the holding, or you break it, and the next time they'll call the holding. It was pretty pitiful, and you know, here's I've got questions to answer too. But the big thing to me is it's just every time Georgia loses, it's like there's a referendum on Mark Richt. Something has to be done about Mark Richt. Well, I think that's probably overreaction as usual, and there's a particular crowd that just doesn't like him, which I understand. There's particular crowds at every school that don't like their head coach, no matter who that person is. You think it was easy for Nick Saban after a couple weeks ago at Alabama? Because it wasn't. He was getting a lot of heat after losing to Ole Miss and beating Arkansas by a point. Um, Programs can correct themselves. Um, Georgia needs to keep winning as much as possible. Yes, they are probably out of the national championship hunt. That seems very true at this moment. They are not out of the SEC hunt. And we don't know what college football will be like in 5 weeks. We don't know. And the point is, you go win the East if you can do it. And right now they still can. All right, here's some questions which I have not yet read. Waits 24. If Georgia was to lose to Kentucky and have an offensive performance similar to blah, 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 would you bench Mason and start Ramsey? Yes, I would, because I think Ramsey needs to play more now. I said that after the Florida game, and I think it's just time. I mean, the kid is special. He's not perfect, and he's not played. Let's see him. I mean, because it can't be worse than what we're seeing right now. I mean, Hudson's not delivering the ball down the field. UGA Dog Forever 08. Do you think Sony plays this weekend? I think probably he plays, but we won't know. I'm taping this today on Thursday. We really won't know. Sony won't know until Thursday. I think Mike Bobo wants him to play and seems to think he's fine. So that seems to me to make it seem like he will probably be there. Do I expect Georgia to be in Atlanta? That's a harder question. No, I think Missouri's going to lose. The question is, will Georgia beat Auburn? And after this past week, it's impossible to think Georgia can beat hardly anybody, let alone Auburn. So I'd say it's a coin flip right now for them to get back to Atlanta. I don't think that it's a certainty by any stretch. After losses, do you wish you had a different job? Yeah, sometimes, because it's so draining that people, understandably, I mean, what the kids don't and what the fans are not wrong. Fans are spending their money, their time, they're investing in emotion. They're not wrong. If they want to boo, if they want to, they're working jobs. So I understand the frustration. What I don't like is the complaining constantly about something that's not going to change. And if the complaining is about that, it won't change. I just disagree with that part, for now. And things can change. I mean, it's not like that it's not like Mark Richt is 100% safe all the time. That notion is overplayed, in my opinion. If Georgia wins out and beats the West winner, say Mississippi State is undefeated, do they put Mississippi State in the playoff with one loss without winning the SEC. This kind of goes back to the SEC title being. I think the dynamics have changed there. I think if Mississippi State has one loss at the end of the season and it's only in the championship game, yes, I do think they will play. Because as we've seen, there are different rules at times each year. The same rule doesn't apply every single year. So that you don't win the conference one year is irrelevant. It just so happens that when Georgia didn't win the conference in 2007 and was the best team in the country, it did matter. So is it fair? No. Aspen Dog, do you think, do you know or have anyone close to the program speak of morale and attitude around the team this week? Do you get the feel that Georgia will rebound and play strong this week or lose twice to Florida? I think these are the type of weeks that you probably the Saturday was probably not the day you were happy to have Mark Richt because the team didn't play well. But this week is probably the week that you are glad you have Mark Richt because he's not going to let it get out of control. That's been my experience the whole time. So, teams play the games and then they're going to go in their cocoon. That's why they don't understand why fans get upset because they don't see it. They don't understand that fans are driving or, a person who's a teacher making 30 grand a year is going to Jacksonville and that basically is their vacation. And they have a particular expectation that even if Georgia loses, they're going to play a particular way. When they don't get that, they're like, well, what the hell am I going down there for? I'm working hard I got to get up Monday morning and I'm watching these clowns get beat right now. It's not unique to Georgia. But, that's not something the kids see. All they see is, oh, I got practice on Monday. And, we're going to get back at it because we think we can win every single time we play. How's David Andrews coming along? If he can't go, who will fill his shoes? He will play. It looks like Hunter Long will play. If David doesn't, I expect David to play. If Hunter's playing, he's got to play better, period. Does Georgia have anyone other than Todd Gurley vocally stepping up to lead this team after this weekend? I don't know the answer to those questions. I mean, David Andrews is basically the team captain. And I think Hudson is certainly a vocal leader, but he's got to be more productive in the game. Pastor Phil 13, what teams are the mini helmets on the bookcase back there? One of these we'll get into the bookcase back there. The bookcase are the 10 traditional SEC teams, South Carolina and Arkansas. So all of the SEC teams. I have yet to purchase any A&M or Missouri helmets, partly because I got all these on sale for like $5 each, and partly because they won't fit on the shelf. Why did Chubb get so few carries in the first quarter? I talked about that earlier because he was on the pace for getting a ton, and then by the time they got him back in there, they were down 2 scores and they needed to score quicker. How bothered are you by Hudson's response to your question? The post game, do you think it's indicative of Hudson not knowing how the game might be called? I think Hudson just wants to win, but I think that it's easy to want to win, and sometimes you don't have every tool to do that. And Georgia has been spoiled. I mean, you think about it. Who's the worst quarterback that played for Georgia that started the entire season? Joe Cox under Mark Richt? Georgia has some very good quarterbacks, and right now we're not seeing very good quarterback play. And if Bryce Ramsey gets in there, I don't expect we see very good quarterback play. I think we see a more dangerous weapon. I don't think we're necessarily going to see great play. There's been times where Hudson's played well. It was not against Florida necessarily. In terms of him answering my question, I mean, I don't know Hudson. I never really met Hudson before this season because I didn't really deal with him in recruiting. So he doesn't know me. I don't know him. I don't have a personal problem with Hudson. I would imagine he doesn't with me. If he has a problem with me, I don't really care. It's that's fine. I get it. But I have to do my job, and part of that is asking questions that are difficult or awkward usually. But part of that process is asking questions that are difficult. We all have people that we deal with or have to answer to or whatever. He doesn't have to answer to me, but I do ask questions. G Knowles 7, off topic. What do you think is happening down in Tallahassee? No leadership is what's happening in Tallahassee. No adults no, the children are taking over, and I'm including Jimbo as one of the children here. They got it. They are going to have some real problems if they don't watch it. As at a minimum, you're talking about PR disaster. Georgia doesn't even know what that is. Florida State, that's a wreck in terms of public relations. Trooper Dog 980. Do you get the feeling during the pregame Florida that there was not fire there? No, I was. No, I don't buy that. I don't. I think once you start looking at that, guys can be hyped up and it's false bravado. Guys can be quiet and they're completely serious or they're scared. You don't know. It's impossible to know. Was it me or did the Florida players seem to consistently taunt or punk our players with virtually no response from our guys? I don't remember that necessarily. It wasn't like 2008. I know that the Gators really ran their mouth after the game. Um, I mean, let me tell you this. I do not get the feeling that this is some sort of thing where Florida is going to take the series over. I think they upset Georgia. And Georgia upset Florida in 1997. The two programs at the time were not anywhere near each other, and Georgia beat the dog shit out of them, just being frank. And those two programs couldn't be anywhere close to the same programs. I think we're seeing that right now. Now, Florida could change, but if I were picking a program, it would still be Georgia. On the bright side, would you agree Georgia matches up favorably with Kentucky's defense? Yes. I mean, the Gators threw the ball 6 times. They probably threw it 5 times too many. Georgia will have the ability to rush the passer this week. Kentucky's quarterback is not that bad now. Will Todd give Georgia the spark needed to beat Auburn and Georgia Tech? I think Georgia can beat both teams without Todd, but and I think they'll have an easier time with Tech because Tech is not as good as Auburn. But Todd changes the dynamic now. Let's not act like Todd doesn't change things because he does. And it could very well be a different Georgia team that arrives in Athens on November 15th. You're going to have 2 things that will be different than any other game this season or any other game this season. Number 1, Todd Gurley is returning from a suspension. That didn't happen any other time this year. He's played every other game. Number 2, and possibly more importantly, Nick Marshall's going to have to deal with coming to Athens. That's not going to be fun. It wasn't fun for Zach last year. We'll see how that goes. Waits 24. When the Power 5 break away from the NCAA, what do you think will happen? Will cheating be even worse than now? Will be anyone remotely trying to focus on enforcing rules? Well, how long? I'm on the board of trustees at Coker. We had probably a 20-minute, 30-minute discussion, and we're a Division II institution. We had probably a 30-minute, 40-minute discussion about what will happen when in 2024 when the NCAA Division I basketball money goes away. And the discussion was about the Power 5 leaving. You don't care about Coker's perspective, and I get that. But in our discussion, I think the writing is on the wall that the Power 5 are leaving, but they'll probably still be underneath the NCAA. They will just have their own rules. Do I think cheating will be worse? I think it's pretty bad right now. I talked with an assistant Division I basketball coach who's not at Georgia that I know, and we were talking about basketball, and I said, about how many of the top 100 guys do you think are getting paid in some way, someone? And he said he thought it was between 70 and 75%. My guess for football is it's not that high, but it's in that ballpark in terms of just any sort of extra benefit. And I don't think that's ever going to change because as long as they're keeping score, people are going to cheat to win. A-Rod, Lance Armstrong, Barry Bonds allegedly, whoever. It's going to happen. One more thing on the Freedom of Information Act for the Todd Gurley situation, reveal who actually contacted Georgia with this so-called evidence. Would like to know if it was Brian Allen or some other media outlet that Allen contacted. That's actually a decent point. It may not have been Brian Allen. It may have been Sports Illustrated. But we will know. We've yet to get the FOI stuff. I don't know when in the world that's coming out. They can't delay it forever. Ongoing investigation. Georgia's investigation finished allegedly, you know, 2 days. And I understand that the NCAA didn't finish their situation with Georgia because Todd and his attorney dragged their feet, which is their prerogative. But we're going to get that. I mean, a it is a felony offense to felony. I'm sure it is a felony to withhold freedom of information from the public. So it's a punishable offense, whatever it is, criminal not to do that. And Georgia will do it. I mean, it's not. They have no choice. They're not God. They can't rewrite the law. So we'll see what happened. It's very possible Sports Illustrated had everything they needed, but it's a little odd to me that they wouldn't have put the video out there if they had it. But let's just say we know that Sports Illustrated knew what was going on. If Georgia didn't act, they would have had some real issues. They would have had probably probation, etc., and a giant black eye institutionally. And the adults in the room and the adults around the world, um, you can't have a reckless athletic department because North Carolina, Penn State, USC, it catches up with you. And, you know, if I were a Georgia fan, I would not want to go through what North Carolina is about to go through. I would not want to go through what Penn State has gone through. Um, Ohio State, I mean, whoever. But these academic scandals and these cover ups like USC, you can't have that, man. I mean, that's the way presidents get fired at universities, not ads and coaches. I mean, the most recognizable name at Georgia is Mark Richt. He's like number 40 on the ladder or whatever. I mean, he reports to the athletic director, who reports to the president, who reports to the board of regent. I mean, who reports to the governor. So, um, you can't have a scandal like North Carolina is about to have. That is unexcusable. It cannot, or inexcusable. Excuse me. You cannot have that. You are wasting taxpayer dollars in a huge way. Anyway, nobody cares about that. But you can't have that. Georgia, I don't think there are any guarantees from here on out, particularly with the way they played this past weekend. Should they beat Kentucky? Yes, they should. Would it stun me if they lost to Kentucky? No. I mean, I'm just living reality here. They're going to have to prove it from here on out. They're going to have to go out there and do it. And they didn't do that in Jacksonville. So, going to have better production from the quarterback spot, period. Defense is going to have to play better than it did. So, we'll see if Georgia can string together 5 wins in a row like they did after their last loss. Possible? Probable? No. But possible? Sure. Georgia and Kentucky.